Welcome everybody coming out this afternoon, this has been a very busy building for the last 3 days, and I want to thank you for coming and being present, but I also want to thank Randy Morris for his generosity. He is very public spirited, and he does everything he can to help people that need a meeting place, and want to thank Randy for doing that. Once again, thank you for being here. If you're my age, you probably remember a movie called A River Runs Through It. And that could kind of be our theme.
It is lovely.
This Alabama is a place where a river runs through it. And there's a lady here in Wedowee who has approached me a number of times who wants to change the state motto from the heart of Dixie to the river state, which would be just as appropriate. And so she's been doing that for quite a while, and I appreciate the work she's doing. But the river state. And it even confused our first colonists. Who were the first settlers of European extraction in Alabama that made a settlement? Does anybody remember? They weren't English. I'm an old history teacher. They were French. They were French. And there was such a flow of water through Alabama. They knew there was a great river that went up near Canada, and they traveled down part of that river and never got into the coast. But they knew there was a great river, and that was the Mississippi River. But when the first French colonists got here, there was such a flow of water coming into Mobile Bay, they thought it was the Mississippi River. And they built their first settlement at Mobile. Mobile, whether you know it or not, is an older city than New Orleans because they made a mistake. They thought they were on the Mississippi River when they were on the Alabama River system at Mobile. And so we've always been blessed, our state has, with rivers and lakes. But the Lemoyne brothers, Bienville and Iberville Lemoyne, were confused even in the start of the 1700s. While most of our lakes are man-made, not all of them, but most of them are man-made, our rivers and streams are God-given. And He selected their site. And we have a stewardship. As a people, we have a responsibility to protect our rivers and lakes and make sure that they remain healthy. Of course, our rivers create and sustain our lakes. There would be no lakes without the rivers. They are the source of the lakes. The Tallapoosa and the Little Tallapoosa feed the waters right out there. They feed the waters of Lake Wedowee. And, right now they're kind of under a little bit of a threat. At least a portion of them are. There's going to be an attempt that's already well underway to divert water away from the Little Tallapoosa. And of course, as water is diverted away, it impacts this lake. It impacts everything downstream from this lake as well, the things that are down there. But there is a reservoir, and if you don't have a copy, these gentlemen right here have a copy of what it's going to look like. And I've never seen anything quite like it. It pumps water from the Little Tallapoosa, what is it, 9 miles or something, roughly?
More, probably around 15.
Around 15 miles. I was way underestimating it. Around 15 miles into a reservoir.
Yeah, it's going to go in between Rambert and Bowdon on Snow Hill.
On Snow Hill.
When you get down to the bottom of Snow Hill, if you're going from Rambert to Bowdon, you can go to the left, and it'll take you up to the existing reservoir now that they're going to make bigger.
Right.
And they also own plenty of land up there as well. I imagine they're going to put a community in, even though they said they wouldn't.
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
So we're having our water tapped into, and that's not what we need. In dealing with water, there are always two things that are of great importance. One of them is quality of the water, and the other one is quantity of the water. And this will greatly impact the quantity of the water. And we've got questions, and I hope we answer some of those tonight. We have some folks here that hopefully can answer some of our questions as to the impact and what we can do, what we can folks that live in this area, what we can do to, and we have people from other counties here with us, Cleburne County, Commissioner Truitt's here, and we've got some from Clay County and different places, so we've got folks that, this is a regional thing, this is an area-wide thing, and we need to try to do what we can to stop this diversion of surface water and into a reservoir. And make sure that if there is a diversion, that the water that is diverted is returned to a proper watershed, that it goes into the right system when it is returned. We are called on, one of our presidents said we always needed to verify, and monitor. And we do. We need to make sure that we've got our facts, our ducks in a row. I remember Mr. Bill Boozer. I don't know if any of the rest of you remember Bill and Ann Boozer that lived on the lake for many years. But I went with Bill out, and he did water samplings. He tested waters. And I hope that's still going on. Some of you that are here, is it?
Yes, we have about 12 to 13 testers that test monthly.
Okay. Well, I went out with him one time, and I noticed he was going to where the creeks entered the lake, basically, and testing the waters there. But Mr. Bill Boozer. I'm glad to have you here. I'm going to ask if Senator Price, Randy, did you want to say something?
I'm good, sir. I'm here to listen.
Just here to listen. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome. Gonna give you the opportunity. We always need an opportunity. So, anyhow, Craig, did you want to come up? You know more about this, or as much about this as anybody here. Would you like to?
I don't mind. I did not prepare anything for a speech, but I can wing it, I guess.
All right. Say what you feel like saying.
Thank you very much. All right. So let's start off with just this sign right here, right? We want to protect the rivers with clean water for people and the nature. Okay? That's not what's going to happen. So, as a veterinarian, we need to talk about what happens when you take water that's hardly existing in the river in the first place. You go upstream from it, in Georgia, right across the state line. Why don't they choose somewhere else? They already got a water treatment plant at West Georgia College in Carrollton. I believe they have one above that. Right? So, you're already getting, as soon as you cross the state line, we now have farms on each side. Well, we have farmers and cows and chickens. Where do you think all that runoff goes to? It goes into the river. Okay? If you take water out of the river, you're decreasing the volume, which is increasing pollution. We all know that the solution for pollution is dilution. Okay? So 6 million gallons of water a day at minimum. This is from their meeting in Bowdon. That was their minimum draw. It could be up to 18 million a day. So that's a lot of water to take out, and right at the state line when they're doing it. That's going to affect us tremendously. Already, right now, I'm avid on the river all the time on the little Tallapoosa up in that area, and we're having to drag our kayaks in places that we used to drive our John boats up, and you're having to drag your kayaks down. Well, that's taking more water out. It's also going to affect the fish, all the other wildlife that are in there as well, trying to live, because all the pollution is going to be condensed right there. And as I understand, you could correct me if you know it different, is that the dam in south of Wedowee here, and the dam only really lets about 6 million gallons run over the dam. Well, if they want to keep the water pool the same, then they're not going to be able to send any water over the dam. In Wadley and everybody south is going to affect them tremendously as well, because they already have a narrow waterway as well. I don't know if the water treatment plant in Wedowee is still active or not on the Little Tallapoosa. I know it was there, Is it still, is it still?
I believe it is.
All right, so how are you gonna get water out for your potable water if there's no water in the little Tallapoosa to get? So I can walk up and down the river most of the way and never get over knee deep. And so it's going to affect us tremendously. And this is a usable river that a lot of people like to take advantage of recreational sports inside of it, whether, with being kayaking and stuff like that. And so I don't understand why we cannot find the regulatory people that we need to find so that we can stop this from happening. It's like they're trying to do this under everybody's eyes. The only people that were notified that this was even going to happen were people like myself, like Scott Butler, like Alan, that have river frontage property that are in the danger zone if the new reservoir dam breaks. That's the only reason we knew about it at all, because we're in that danger zone. It's not that I'm scared of being in that danger zone. I think that the architects and people that build dams and stuff are pretty good at it now. But why do they need this extra water? They already have a reservoir up there. And they're already pulling water, like I said, I know for sure from right above West Georgia College on 27. And I think that their intentions is to use it to sell. I think Carroll County is greedy. And I think they're planning on selling all that water. How are you going to put it back into the system? The next thing I'd like to mention is, if we are monitoring the water, we need to do the same that they're doing. I don't know if you're familiar between Graham and Bowdon, we cross the little Tallapoosa there on 100, all right? That they have a monitoring station there. And you can look it up on your phone. It tells you how many gallons are running through there every day. And it helps you judge whether or not you can go kayaking and stuff. Well, anyway, why don't we have something on the Alabama side that says, hey, this is how much is going across here. Once they start pulling water, how is it affecting us? I don't know if we can stop them right now. They've already got the one piece of property that they have to replace for the wildlife, for what damage they're going to do. They've already been developing on that for over a year. They're going to be taking the water out off of Reevesville Road, which is the next bridge up from 100 upriver. Okay? Then they're going to pump, like I said, all the way to Snow Hill, and then up to that reservoir. How is that water supposed to get back into the little Tallapoosa? We said that was supposed to be a rule, there's something we needed to do. How's it going to get back to us? Where's it going to get back to us? They're going to put it back in up there where they took it? We need these questions answered. We need to find out which people are in the regulatory, federally, that are responsible for helping us. There used to be some committees. I know that both Congress and Senate had committees on water systems. Probably the last time it was used was on the Tennessee River up around Gunnersville area, when they were trying to come across the little spot in Georgia and they were going to take a bunch of water out of it. And they stopped them from doing so. And you would think the Tennessee River would be hard to make an effect of pumping a little bit of water out. But it was enough that they said no. So we need to build a fight, because this is going to be our last chance. Once they start taking it, unless we have some proper monitoring that says that if we're at low pool, you can't take any water out. If it's at high flooding pool, fine, take what you want. But when it's low pool, we all need that water. You're also going to start seeing that animals that have, we were supposed to have fences, but not all farmers have fences on their lines with the cows. Well, when they can walk across the water that's this deep, you're going to have cows walking back and forth across the river onto other people's properties. That's not going to make anybody happy either. So our main goal is to find out what regulatory agencies can help us. Who do we need to talk to? Who's going to be active? Who's going to stand up? Has anybody from Alabama even talked to anybody from Georgia, from their water authority in Carroll County? I don't know that. Does anybody know that question? Has anybody talked to them? How come we're all just now the first now to know about this? I did go to the meeting in Bowdon. A few of us did. And there was nobody from Alabama that had any authority whatsoever that showed up at this meeting to find out what's going on. Why when I talk to congressmen and senators, that they don't even know? So we need to make it aware. And anybody that knows anybody that can find a regulatory process, We need to tap into it. There's got to be somebody that is monitoring and can say, look, we need this much water for our fish. This is how much pollution that we're going to have. And going ahead and do some of the monitoring in those upper areas where the low water already exists. And so an area, I don't know if any people are familiar with Butler's Mill and Cole's Mill. All right. Well, just summer, the whole time, I could never kayak across Cole's Mill without dragging it across 50 yards. That's a long time. Right now, the water should be up near the banks. My little island that I've got, a little rock island, it's still sitting out of the water. It's never out of the water this time of year. And so now they want to even rob it more. So that was just the basics of what's going on, and hopefully we have enough people that are interested that can get more people active to try to make this stop, or at least have some kind of regulations on them, and have a reporting system that makes them be true and right, where there's an oversight on how much they're allowed to take. I guess I'm done there. I'm sorry I was just winging it, but oh, you want to talk about the paper?
Yes, is this something that you brought?
Yeah, this is something that they gave us originally from
I thought
that.
you might want to
Yes.
share that's back there.
Yes.
I'll
So
be glad to put it back on the table.
In this letter that's on this pamphlet, there's a website that you can go. It's www.InionCreekReservoir.com. And if you're savvy enough, you can navigate to find all the amounts of water, the permits and everything. It's in there, but you have to be diligent in finding it. But it will tell you all the requirements and the environmental impact and everything about it. But it's a big site, but it has anything just about you'll want to find out about it.
right, and we need people from Alabama that has jobs in this area to fight for us. Who do we need to reach out to? Do we need to have these committees started back up again? The committees existed to fight the water system. John Rice did it a long time ago with the Chattahoochee in Atlanta, and he put a bunch of fines on them. Eventually, after about $250,000 a day worth of fines, they caved in and started doing things right. So anyway, does anybody have these papers in front of them, or would like one? I have plenty.
I can pass them out for you.
Okay.
If you want to talk.
I just need one, and thank you. So on the written page here, it tells you how much that they are taking 6 million additional water per day. They had an in-person meeting in Bowdon last year, and then they had one a couple of weeks ago that was through the internet. And sorry, I was in the woods in a tree stand and didn't get an internet service. They're still not reaching out to anybody from Alabama. Nobody from Alabama knows about this. If you take a look at the picture side, so the big Indian Creek's mitigation site, that is where they're making the wildlife area back again for what they're going to tear up. This little area which is the raw intake station, that's Reevesville Road where I was telling you where they're going to take the water out. Look how long that line is going all the way up across to a reserve that's already there, because you can see it. And they wanted to make it that much bigger. But I don't see anything where water's going to come back. I don't see any lines that says that there's water coming back. If that's the agreement, then how are they going to accomplish that goal? And if they sell the water, or if it goes to other places in Carroll County, well, that part of the river basin is going to go to the Chattahoochee. It's not going to go back into our river basin. You don't know, they're crisscrossing it all across. We have no control of where that water goes. But I do encourage everybody to reach out to everybody they know and see if we can't find a way to stop it. Yes?
You said, Doc, that they're monitoring at the state line. How many gallons a day?
Yes, so I've watched them plenty of times. They got a little unit on that bridge.
All right, but who is actually overseeing that monitoring system?
I don't know. At one point in time, there's a canoeing and kayaking site that can tell you that a website that you can look on there and find out what bridges have monitors on them and how much water is passing.
Probably the US Geological,
Say again?
USGS has water monitoring stations in a variety of different places all over the US. But they're generally paid for by someone. So like I live near a Tyson chicken plant, and so that Tyson is the primary person who pays for that monitoring because they have to look at how much water there is to know how much discharge they can have into the river. So.
And so we need one on our side. And we also need to have the water checked to find out what the coliform count is right now before they even start. And if people don't know what the coliforms are, that would be your E. coli, your salmonella, the things that make you sick. Also, if we have seen in droughts before, ichthyosis comes in and all the fish have this slimy stuff on them to where you can't and don't want to eat them. So that's been going on. I haven't seen that in 15 years. But back 15, 20 years ago, you catch fish and when we were going through a drought, and that's what they looked like. Again, it's not going to help anything with the crayfish, the salamanders, the small stuff like that. Or the beavers and muskrats. Go ahead,
Greg, I think in the write-up, it says that it's to be monitored 2 years before the project is started, and then through construction, and then up to 10 years together after it's completed. But it's got in that website, it tells about the monitoring.
But who is monitoring that?
It's going to be them, not us. So there's got to be an oversight committee of some sort that's going to say, hey, or somebody's going to be standing right there with them. And are you doing this?
Additional legislation that says how much can be taken out at points of. So, like you mentioned a while ago, I'm Donna McKay, the mayor of Wadley, and we have the Tallapoosa that runs right through our town.
Yeah, so if they don't send any water over the dam, how are you going to get water?
And we're already dragging canoes, and we're trying to get, when the new bridge comes, we're trying to get access of the right-of-way of the old bridge to put in a kayak canoe launch. But we have an endangered salamander there at Wadley. And, you know, this will greatly affect an endangered species, and if nothing else speaks to them, oftentimes things like that will.
I know there is a fish. I've only seen this fish twice, but it's a strange short fish with a large mouth with huge teeth in it. And I'm like, what is this fish?
Sort of a
Right?
gar.
It's not a gar. Gar have long. This is not a gar. I've seen this fish twice, and I'm like, and we have other animals in there that I'm sure that you can find something endangered in every single river. Red-eye bass and stuff like that. They're very popular. Some of I think even the record of smallmouth bass came out of the Little Tallapoosa River. But we need to protect, because like I said, the main thing is we know that it's going to be more concentrated as soon as you cross the state line, because they're taking the water out right there. Why don't they take it up way up high? And let the water that comes from the rain fill it back up before, you don't have to take it out of the state line. That's not fair.
Would organizations like the Sierra Club be of any help?
I don't know much about the Sierra
That's
Club.
what we're here for. We're going to talk in just a minute.
Okay, I'm gonna get down. I'm gonna get down and let you guys talk, unless you have any questions for me.
Any questions for Craig?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Some of the folks in this room are living it already or getting ready to. It's maybe we can get some answers. We're very happy to have the Alabama Rivers Alliance with us, and we're going to get up here. Mr. Charles Miller, who is right over here, is going to speak to us, and then Martha Hunter. No, you're not speaking.
I might,
But that is Martha.
I'll chime in if I need it.
And Cindy Lowry is sitting right over here. She's director. And so right now to discuss what our options are and what we can do, you want to come speak,
Yeah.
Cindy?
Well, I'll call Charles up in just a minute, but
Okay.
I'll give a little bit more.
You
a
go
little bit of
right ahead.
background. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Representative Fincher, for letting us join you in this, and Senator Price for being here as well, and Mayor McKay? I can't believe I forgot that. Donna, okay. So I just want to give a little background about what our organization, who we are and what we do, and then I'm going to turn it over to Charles, who is our policy director that has been looking into the reservoir since some of you let us know about it. We've only found out about it recently as well, but we do have some experience in this area, and we do hope we can provide some answers and also offer some more help to try to get things organized and get us all in working against this thing if we, whatever we can do. So the Alabama Rivers Alliance we're a private nonprofit, so we're not funded by the government, we're funded by private donations. We've been around since the 1997, and we're a network of local community-based organizations, watershed-based organizations like River Keepers, Friends of the Creek groups all over the state. There's over 100 organizations in our network now. Most of them are small community groups that are all volunteer, that form just for these reasons, because they love their water in their community, and they want to protect it, and things happen, and they want to figure out what to do about it. So we are a small staffed organization, so we rely on all of those local partners in our network to be the eyes and ears out there telling us what's going on. So because our friend Donna Matthews is in this community, and she lets us know a lot about what's going on here, and so because you guys are out there and you've noticed this and you're letting people know, the word has trickled to us. Sometimes we don't get out in front of it as quickly as we'd like if we don't know you. We only know who we know, right? So we do hope you'll sign up for our email list so that we can be in more constant touch and know what's going on. Some of the things that we work with the partner groups all around the state to help keep everyone connected and moving in the same direction. But we also look at statewide policy and regulatory issues. So how can we affect these things that are threatening our waterways in a positive way? How can we defend against bad things and proactively work towards good things? We do work in the Alabama legislature. Charles registers as a lobbyist during the session, and we have had some successes over the years. We have worked on the hydropower relicensing of all of our major river systems, trying to get those dams to operate in a better way that's good for the landowners along the water, but also for the fish and the habitat that they create. We participated in fighting new dams where we thought that they weren't necessary. So we do have some expertise in the processes that it takes to kind of organize and resist things that are affecting our waterways. One thing I'll say from just a short and unfortunate answer is there is no state level authority for the kinds of questions that you want answered for this issue. One thing that we've advocated for decades in Alabama is an Alabama water plan to answer those exact questions. How do we protect the water that's in the system? How do we regulate or better account for how much water is being taken out of these river systems and whether they're being put back in? And so we don't have a permitting system for water withdrawals in Alabama. There's a voluntary certificate of use that you sign up for with the Office of Water Resources that will, water utilities, if you're using more than 100,000 gallons a day, you're supposed to sign that certificate of use saying that you are using this much and it's a beneficial use. But the only recourse as a person or as a landowner or citizen you have, if you're downstream of something that you don't necessarily agree with, is to sue that upstream entity, because we don't have a current framework in place for a state agency to kind of be accountable. And I know nobody really likes the word regulate, but that's the best word I can think of for sort of managing that water that's in the system. Now on the flip side of that, we want to protect the amount of water that's in the system, just like you said, for fish and wildlife and kayaking and drinking water quality and all of those things. So we don't want to permit out all of the water. So just why we haven't just gone and tried to get Representative Fincher or one of our senators to introduce a bill for permitting alone, because that would be sort of a one-sided system where you can just take all the water out, and we don't want that. So it's got to be balanced, and and Georgia has a lot more robust water plan in place that they created back about in 2005 when the water wars between the states were in real height. And we just haven't been able to quite get there as a state in Alabama, but there has been some progress made. Governor Bentley kicked off a process for all the state agencies to get together called the Alabama Water Agencies Working Group. and start to analyze what we have and what we need and bring stakeholders together. They put out some reports and made some recommendations. Unfortunately, that's kind of gone dormant over the last several years. Governor Ivey, as you know, inherited a bit of a scandal after Governor Bentley left, so she pretty much shut down, I think, anything he was doing. I don't want to judge her reasoning because I have no idea then we've had things like pandemics and things that have taken up, and it's rained a lot. It's rained a heck of a lot in the last several years. So we haven't had a huge major drought. We almost had, got into one this year, but that's what usually drives this kind of decision-making and urgency for this policy. But one of the things that we've been trying to do is revive that conversation. How can we, and that's what we can do, that's what we can, as an organization, and you can do as people who care about these issues, is talk to your legislators and try to get that conversation going again. And there was in 2007 a permanent joint legislative committee on water policy and management. Now that is not a committee that meets during the session and passes bills. It's a permanent committee that is made up of both House and senators, and they get together and they study these issues and they can make recommendations for bills to pass or bills to introduce, and they can work with folks like us. And that committee hasn't met in several years, since Governor Bentley kicked off that process. It was more in the executive branch, and that committee kind of let that ride, and they haven't really met in a long time. So we've been trying over the last few years to get that committee reappointed and meeting again. So that's one thing that we would love to talk to y'all about, is how to, and work with Representative Fincher on getting those committee members reinstated, so that committee can get caught up on some of the threats and on some of the progress that's happened. Something that did come out of the process before was the Drought Management Act, which has made a lot of progress in different entities communicating about drought in the state and how it's impacting the state. And different agencies and stakeholders get together once a month, and the Office of Water Resources and the USGS and some of these folks that do some of the over-monitoring, they talk about where we are with regards to drought and inform water utilities and other large water users about things. There's no regulatory aspect of that bill, so they can't say don't use water or cut back on water, but there's communication happening, and they're encouraging everyone to come up with plans for what to do. And that's really where we have to start with the water plan, is a conversation about what do we do in times of conflict? What do we do when we have a situation like this? Who do we go to? Who's going to be overseeing what Georgia's doing upstream, what Tennessee's doing upstream, what Mississippi's doing upstream, and what we are doing within our own boundaries for our waterways. And certainly when water users and the citizens of Alabama have issues, who can they go to? So that's an advocacy thing that's long term. Short term, we do need to, and as far as federal government goes, there aren't really federal laws that govern all, like the Clean Water Act is for water quality. They don't have one for water quantity. It's a state by state thing. Now the feds, as you mentioned, have gotten involved when it's been the water conflicts between the states. And the Tallapoosa is one of those watersheds, as you guys know, that has multiple layers of rules and regulatory entities involved with it. They have the Army Corps of Engineers with the manuals, the ACT manuals. They have the Alabama Powers Federal Energy Regulatory Commission license that governs some of the things that happen along the waterway. So there's these layers of entities that have to be involved in all of this as well. And I would think that Alabama Power would either be paying for that monitor on the state line or have their own monitors, because they need that flow to come downstream as well. So I don't know if we've talked to them about it, but they'd probably be an entity that needs to be talked to. So I'm going to stop talking now and let Charles come up and see if he has been looking into the information that y'all have given us and the draft EIS on this reservoir, and may have a little bit more information about where the flows might go and some of the things that we might consider. We're open to answer we work on a lot of issues around the state, so we're open to answer questions about other issues as well. And I do have some ideas after we just discuss more about how we might get together with y'all to get engaged more. Maybe we need to see if we can call a public meeting with some of these water authorities and all the entities that are going to be involved and that need this water coming downstream, and have this conversation with them. short of that, we can just go and meet with them privately and find out more and take you guys with us. But we can talk about that later. I'll let Charles come up and say some things he might have learned in his research.
All right, thank you, Cindy. I don't really have a ton to tell y'all today, but I can shed some light on a couple things. For one thing, I know y'all got that letter that's from USDA, right, Department of Agriculture. So they are the federal entity that is funding the reservoir. Now, the good thing about that is that comes with some strings attached. That means that the Carroll County Water Authority can only use that water for certain things. It means, they can't put hydropower on it and change when they let the water out without permission from somebody else. So that is a positive thing. I also have another positive thing that, as far as I can tell, based on where Carroll County's water treatment plants are, you're probably gonna wind up with the water that they pump out, use for residences, for agriculture out there. If it's treated, it's gonna come back into the little Tallapoosa. It's not gonna go off into the Chattahoochee Basin, which is good. One thing I really do want to underscore is that the reason that we're in a situation like we are here, where there's not a lot of kind of immediate state level tools, is compounded by the fact that we don't have a water plan. I'm sure y'all are aware, for decades there's been ongoing, they call them water wars, there's been ongoing litigation between us, Florida, Georgia, over water in not only, this shared river, but basically all the rivers that our states share. As Cindy said, there's no federal statute, there's no federal law that Congress has passed that really says anything about water quantity. What that means is the Supreme Court gets to decide every water quantity dispute between states in the whole country. And over the past 5 to 10 years, they've dealt with a few of them. And if there's one takeaway, it's that if your state doesn't know and cannot show and cannot prove that you are stewarding your water resources in a way that the court can understand, then you're in a real bad position. They're going to basically tell you, well, I'm sorry, Georgia's got this incredible plan they put together in 2005 that, they know where every drop of water is going, where it's going back, all of this. Alabama, you can't even tell me how much water a sector of industry uses. Mm-mm. So, unfortunately, that means when push comes to shove, that Georgia knows that they're more likely to kind of win if there was ever going to be any kind of legal fight. And so, I think we just cannot underscore enough that long term, in order to fix these kind of problems and stop these kind of issues where another state, be it Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, whatever, is appropriating waters that would otherwise flow into Alabama and impacting Alabama rivers, streams, lakes, reservoirs, we've got to have something more robust than what we have in terms of understanding how we use our water in this state. Obviously, that's not a quick fix, but we are gonna, I'm gonna continue. That EIS comment period is closed with NRCS, but there will probably be, and I'll have to look and see when these dates are, and I'll try to get some out to you, but there will probably be other times when we can engage either with the federal government or perhaps even Georgia state government. And I do think Cindy's idea of having a public meeting with Carroll County Water Authority with some of y'all there is fantastic. So that's kind of what I've got right now. We've kind of just really dipped our toe in this. It's not something we've really had a lot of opportunity to learn about, because like Cindy said, we've learned about it pretty recently as well. But rest assured, we will try to figure out everything we can to kind of make sure that, this doesn't happen, and then if it does happen, that, Alabamians' rights to our water are protected. So.
Charles, thank you. I was on that joint committee, the water committee, and you're right. A few years ago, we just quit meeting. I mean, it just dissolved, and we were never called into meetings again. And so to a certain extent, I think I'd admit that we in the legislature have dropped the ball in what needed to be done.
Well, and I'll tell you, at this point, I think it's basically we just need one more appointment, and that's from the speaker, so.
I think he has two, maybe.
Oh, he has two? Okay, oh, okay, yeah.
I don't know.
We'd have a fully functioning committee at
We
that
wrote him a
point.
letter last year and asked him to reappoint, and he didn't, I don't know if he just didn't see it or didn't have time. Ainsworth did appoint two.
In the Senate,
two
he did,
senators,
but not
yeah.
in the House. Speaker.
And then there's some of the committee, if I remember correctly, are just heads of certain committees.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is I think there's some committee titles that may have changed since then, so we may have to do some finagling and figure out what that committee is now, but it seems to me kind of the only real substantive thing that's preventing it from meeting again would be that it's not fully filled.
And there are only one or two slots that need to be filled.
Mm-hmm. And I think they're all the
And
responsibility.
they're in the House.
Yes, I think
So
they're all
the
led
speaker needs to
betters.
make the appointment.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you can help us get a meeting with him, we're happy to sit down and talk more about this. And, if there's anything that,
I'll be glad to call him.
any kind of push we need to make as an advocacy standpoint, we're happy to do.
Yeah.
It
I can
really
send
is
emails.
just, there's a lot that's happened since.
Of course, that's not gonna create a water plant.
No,
No,
but
no.
I think there's a lot that's happened since the committee met last, that it would be really good. Y'all have been funding water assessments, for example, every year, which is great. Surface water and groundwater assessments. It'd be great to hear from those agencies what they've been done. So we are trying to account for how much water we have through those agencies. It's at a very broad scale. But again, that's, without the plan and a little more of a framework, it's hard to know if they're getting, if the data is, really accurately being accounted for. But there are some things happening that are trying to get there. We just need it all to come back into a conversation. And with some goals and decisions to be made.
So we cannot compel Georgia or the Bowdon folks to tell us how much water they're taking out of the river.
We should have a pretty good idea based on what the stuff they're doing within RCS. And I think, as
Well,
you
that's
mentioned,
sheet
between
paper.
6 and 18 million
Yeah.
gallons a day.
We
But
just
again, that's
can't-
pretty-
We just can't compel them not to.
That's a
do
lot.
it.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a pretty big variance when you look at it like over a year, right?
Right. I think the other thing to think about here is when you reduce the water that's coming down, your groundwater as well, where you're getting wells from. Well, a lot of us in that part of Alabama, we're still in the well system because we don't have public water.
Right.
And it has even less like oversight than surface water does.
The water table is dropping.
I know a lot of people's wells that have shallow wells that just aren't functioning right
It's
now.
going short away.
And Craig, after it's in Randolph County, after it's in Alabama a while, we get some pretty good sized creeks that feed into it. But that stretch you're talking about has always been shallow, and you're taking what little bit, you can completely dry the river up in that spot just about.
And it could even be, I've talked to some folks here, maybe it kind of burning the candle at both ends. We're not only losing water volume, but we're getting sedimentation that's kind of making it more shallow as well, so.
When we were in the meeting in Bowdon, we asked several questions about the water flow management. And when they take the water flow measurement at the Highway 100 bridge, if it drops below a certain level, they're supposed to cut off taking the water out of the river. That was my understanding. But
who's
it has to be
that?
right.
Well, so I don't know if that's a 7Q10. I mean, there's
I don't know.
some backstop on, I know my voice is not very loud. There's some backstop on how much water you can take out for water quality permits. So if there's an industry that has a discharge permit, or even a water treatment plant or something that has a discharge permit, then if the water level gets below a certain amount, they won't be able to discharge because they won't be able to meet their pollution standard. And then Georgia may have more in place law-wise for even for water flows and water quantity. We don't have them here in Alabama. Like, there's nothing that says you can't, if you own the land next to the water, you basically can take out as much as you want unless your downstream neighbor sues you. So.
I think it says in the permit that the applicant is Carroll County, and it says in there that the applicant is responsible for monitoring. say the fox is in charge of the hen.
And that's very typical with all environmental rules, unfortunately, that's very typical. Did you have a question?
Yeah, this may be a stupid question, but
No such.
since Georgia, Tennessee, I assume, have these robust water plans, why doesn't Alabama?
We just haven't gotten there yet.
I mean,
it takes a lot of, Georgia put a lot of, I will say Tennessee just did one a few years ago, and I won't say that theirs as robust as Georgia's.
okay,
Georgia did a 5-year process that had a funding and a facilitator and stakeholders and agencies all involved, and theirs still has flaws. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but they did it because of the water wars. They needed that water for Atlanta, and they were in the earlier 2000s they were losing the water wars more often than since then it's kind of gone in their favor, to Charles's point. But Tennessee did one more recently, I think, to sort of for the same reason, to say like we've got something in place that accounts for how we're going to manage conflict and how we're going to, how much water we're using. So we just, we tried to get there, but there was never funding put toward it. The agencies met with an unfunded mandate, basically, under Governor Bentley. And it does require a lot of conflicting interests to come together and agree on stuff. And that's a hard thing to do. And there's a lot, the largest water users in the state are Alabama Power, and agriculture actually is not a huge user of water in Alabama. We don't irrigate much in the state, but there is a need, there is an interest in irrigating more, and there's some incentives that have been passed in recent years for farmers to irrigate more because rains are, unpredictable sometimes, and so there's definitely a need for it. But getting all those entities together to agree on things is hard. And then there's us, and we're advocating for the environment, so we're one of those interests.
I'll add to that, just fundamentally, we inherited our water law from England. It rains a lot in England, right? And it rains a lot here. Adjoining states like Georgia, they're in a little different position with us because of their population. Fundamentally, right. Alabama has always kind of, at least up until the turn of this past century, has kind of always been able to just depend, well, there's going to be enough water for everybody.
Right.
So you don't need to figure out what happens in times of drought. But now, that's partially due to our neighbors, that's no longer the case. And so we do, there is a stronger incentive now.
Yeah, and one of the things that's been really interesting to see, after the process that Governor Bentley and the agencies and us were part of, a lot of the universities started looking at this a lot more. And some of the research that's come out, particularly about agriculture, looking at what farmers, when droughts happen and when they might need water, there aren't many times a year or over the course of a few years where we're just in dire need, where we're running out of water somewhere that's like, but what happens is you get these 13-day droughts in the middle of the summer, and that doesn't affect me and you that much, but it affects a farmer a lot. Sure. So there's just these little things that affects
we hardly got any hay this year.
Yeah, so there's things like that the universities are starting to show that if we had a water planning process, we can look at those things and say, well, here's how we're going to manage that. Here's how we're going to help those farmers. There may be times where we have to cut back on water use for that farmer in that watershed, but we're exploring things like where crop insurance kick in, and so there's a lot of layers to what this might look like, but you can't get anywhere without the conversation and without everybody coming together, and that's really what the state legislature and the governor and all of those entities are really going to have to be the ones to pull everybody together, because we would love to pull it together as Alabama Rivers Alliance, but I don't know that everybody would come to the table.
What if you did get the universities, Auburn, Alabama, the larger universities that pull a lot of strings in this state, involved and interested? I mean, would they be a driving force that could help us?
Yes, and they have been. I mean, they were very involved in the first part, the first iteration. Of course, they have to do what their funding dictates.
Well, of course.
But they were very involved in the first round, and I know they would be very involved. They helped host meetings. They helped educate legislators, and
when you refer to the first round, you're talking when Governor Bentley was, okay.
We call it the AWAG. It's kind of a weird term, but that was the Alabama Water Agency's working group. It was about 2012 to 2015, 16 process, and it was 5 state agencies that deal with water. So ADM, Alabama Department of Environmental Management, the Department of Conservation, the Office of Water Resources, which is the, do you want me to get by the front of the microphone?
Speak louder.
Sorry. The Office of Water Resources is the one under ADECA that is water, they're what we call the Water Quantity Agency. They don't regulate a whole lot, but they do get those certificates of use, and they look at the floodplain mapping and some of those things. And Department of Agriculture, Geologic Survey of Alabama, and then the state climatologists. They were all part of the AWAG, and they met. Now, we couldn't go to those meetings because they weren't an official entity, so they weren't open to the public. But we hosted public meetings all over the state with the AWAG to keep up with what they were doing. And then the governor put together these focus panels on the specific issues of a water plan that were, and you probably remember all this because legislators were involved too, but the issues like permitting and interbasin transfers and riparian rights and conservation efficiency that were kind of like the components of a water plan. He created focus panels on each of those with invited experts, and those went on for about a year. And report came out of that right as Governor Bentley was leaving office, and it never got submitted to the public. But we have seen parts of that report, and it basically it wasn't a water plan. It was just more questions than answers. But that was just where we were, and we need to just pick back up there.
Would it make sense to now, if you're trying to get all these entities together, would Auburn be a driving force on that, or
I think because, I'll give you my opinion. I mean, legislators, Senator, y'all may have an opinion, and others. Based on our experience, we really want the state agencies to be the drivers of this, because they're going to be the ones that have to implement it. And there's been a proposal out of one professor from Alabama, a presentation I saw that was maybe we need to create a new state agency that's kind of overarching all of this. But we want the agencies involved, and in order for them to really be required to do it, it has to be led by state legislators and the governor, because really the governor is their person, the one who says what they have to do or sort of directs them. So if it's not from that high level, then I don't know that they would be able to do it as robustly as if they were directed to do it by their state leaders. But I think Auburn and Alabama and UAH and all the universities that have already been involved would definitely be key components, yeah.
Well, what are the ones that the agencies that were involved previously? Are they interested in restarting this talk, or?
I mean, I think they are, but they're subject to political culture or political whatever's going on, and so they're not necessarily going to speak out until they're told to.
Gotcha.
There was a question back there.
Kind of looking historically, haven't we had to deal with Georgia, Alabama, and even Florida, like with another river that we shared? I think the Chattahoochee. Can we gain any information from that experience as to the entities that were involved in mediating a solution there?
Well, there's still not a solution there. But that, I think, is what Charles was referring to, that the Supreme Court had to engage in. And their latest ruling, if I recall, was basically in favor of Georgia. Florida has had a plan forever, and theirs is like, their water authorities have taxing authority and all kinds of stuff that we wouldn't even attempt here. But they had a lot of data that they put together for that case, and they still didn't win it. But that was, the court was basically ruling on the Flint River's impact on mainly the Flint, on that particular case, their impact on the oyster and commercial fisheries in Apalachicola. And they just ruled that what was happening upstream was not impacting that. These lawsuits, and Charles is the lawyer, so I don't want to speak out of my head here, but they are usually on a very specific piece of this But I will say what we can learn, which is something that did come out of the ACF, Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint Basin issues, was something called the ACF Stakeholders Group. And they've been meeting for years. We were a part of it a while back. We haven't had the capacity to really engage lately. But they created a sustainable water management plan for that basin and tried to present it to the governors. I don't think it quite got accepted, except that, I don't know if y'all read recently that Governor Ivey and Governor
Kemp?
Was that
Kemp.
Kemp? Yeah, sorry. They got together and they did agree on some stuff on the Chattahoochee. And part of that did come from that sustainable management plan that this group had come up with. This group was the most well thought out stakeholder group I've ever seen. No politicians were allowed, or no elected officials, no offense. And so but mainly the governors were involved. But Alabama Power, Southern Company was at the table, nonprofits like Riverkeepers and us, lake groups along the waterway. They had all these different sort of stakeholder seats, and they ruled by consensus. So, I mean, these meetings would take forever, but eventually they got somewhere. So that's a model I think that is very promising if we wanted to do something like that in Alabama, to develop a water plan, or even just on the ACT. I think that's and we know a lot of the folks that were engaged. And now they also had a big, rich donor in Georgia that gave them like millions of dollars to do a bunch of studies. So I don't know where we would find that in Alabama. We don't have those kind of donors. But if we could find that, if y'all know somebody to give $1 million to do some studies on the ACT, then you're going to give us $1 million?
No, I don't have any.
Chris is following. I don't make very much.
I'll also say this, that litigation, that single case went on for decades, decades. And so the big lesson I take out of it is, if you can get what you want without having to go to court, you should probably do that. Because it's going to wind up with giving you a lot more peace of mind and a lot faster. And so I think in a situation like this particular reservoir, I think, and from what I've heard tonight, y'all have a pretty good sense of, you're as much concerned about the impacts as you are the reservoir being there in the first place. So if there's a way that we can get promises in writing that are binding, that can, make sure that there's always going to be this much at, that bridge. There's always going to be this much downstream of Lake Wedowee. There's going to be enough for fish. There's going to be enough that cattle aren't going to be able to wade across the creek. Those kind of things, those are the kind of things, you've got to have kind of at the forefront of your mind. And if you can get those without litigating, then you're in good shape.
And just like they're looking for the right entities to get dialogue with, you also look for advocates, and right off the bat, I'm thinking Alabama Power, but then you got Georgia Power, and guess what? They're all owned by Southern Company. So it's like, do you get an advocate out of the power company? I don't know.
Why wouldn't the EPA or something like that be involved, or the Army Corps of Engineers of Alabama?
Well, they certainly have to be. They have their own, like I said, their own layer of rules, but for these types of issues on this water system. So the Corps has their manual that says this is how they think it needs to be managed. And the only recourse we can do is, if we don't like the way what that says is challenge it, which I think Alabama and Alabama Power challenged the ACT manual in court. And I think that's kind of dormant while they were waiting on things to settle down on the ACF. But that's still out there. And so I do think Alabama Power, even though they're a Southern Company, if it's in their interest on this system, they will advocate. We don't usually stand on the same side as them, not gonna lie, but if it's in their best interest to get that water downstream, which it should be, they would advocate for it. And they would have some more insight into what is happening upstream, because they do have other entities in Georgia. So now EPA is we've tried to get ADEM and EPA to engage on water flows, on water quantity, and they don't really want to engage there as much. Except for, like as I mentioned, where it impacts water quality, if there's a discharge permit or something, they will, but they don't ADEM at least has said many times that they do not regulate flows. And so that's, it's just their Clean Water Act, and this other thing is sort of outside of that in their minds.
Maybe we should start with the water quality something first, and get it in paper first, and say, this is where it already is. If you do this to us, we use the math and tell you.
Well, and if you've got, if you know of any entities that do discharge, especially in that area, or downstream, if you've got a water treatment facility or something that is discharging downstream, that will be impacted by its permit will be impacted by that, or is impacted by drought. I mean, we've seen that before, where the industries that would not normally be on the same side are on the same side because they don't want their permit to get stricter because there's not enough flow. So if there are any industries in that section, that might be. Or farmers don't really have direct permit for discharge. They're just non-point source, so they wouldn't necessarily be involved. But
Or cities or towns that have wastewater treatment plants on the Little Tallapoosa, anywhere between where the outtake is and where like Wedowee impoundment starts.
But we can, if, you know, I know you're ready to get back up here, and I'm just talking. We can have a separate meeting specifically on this with you guys to think a little more about how we organize and resist. And certainly, we need to, I think we want to do a little more research and maybe reach out to Carroll County Authority and see what they say, at least.
What is the
Sometimes if an
timeline?
environmental group reaches out, they might think.
I agree, that's what we were hoping would be here the first time. That's what we were wondering, we couldn't understand, if they're having this meeting, how come nobody else knows about it? Nobody else showed up to the meeting.
Yeah, we just didn't know. I wish we had have known early on, because it is easier to do it earlier on. Again, we have, you know, we keep trying our hardest to reach out to as many as we can, and we just have as much reach as we can, and we hear about these, we rely on you guys to tell us about these things. So unfortunately, we just didn't know about this one.
What's the timeline on this? Do you know?
I don't know a date final when they're going to say they're going to start filling the reservoir, but I would imagine at least a year or two.
Okay.
I want to say it's 2026 maybe, is what they said?
Is the EIS the last step?
If they started building the reservoir, I mean,
So on that paper, that piece of land where they're making, that they have to do first, yeah, that's done. I've been by there, dozers have all been in there, they're creating all kinds of little swampland stuff and.
Mitigation.
And we know most of us, we know the farmer that sold the land and he made a boatload of money. And
So to understand is, the reservoir is there, they're just making it bigger.
they're making it bigger. They also told us during that as well, they own a lot of land around it. And if you think for a minute that they're not gonna make that lake bigger and make it a community.
Is it water supply?
Of course they are.
Of course they are. So why are we providing an extra lake for them? They already have a lake.
There are some rules around water supply reservoirs, at least in Alabama. I would imagine it's the same in Georgia, where because of the water quality issues, you can't necessarily have like you have around. Like I know there's Birmingham has a reservoir in the town I'm from in Blount County that nobody can build a house on, and you have to get even a permit to just go out with a non-motorized boat and fish on it because it's a water supply. So, and some of the other Birmingham Waterworks, other reservoirs have actually just had a big environmental push and fight and ended up with conservation easements around the whole entire system to keep the water quality in the reservoir. So that'd be another great question for them. Is like and for us, so we can look up Georgia's rules.
What is their plan? What is their plan for this water? Are they going to sell it? I asked this question multiple times.
Yeah, that's a
They
good
beat around
point.
the bush and didn't give us an answer.
Yeah.
And so I think they're planning on selling it to Atlanta.
And then it don't have to come back to us.
Then it's not going to come back to us.
Yeah.
Then it will be in the Chattahoochee.
It'll be the
Yeah.
Chattahoochee. 6 million more, 18 million more gallons going down the Chattahoochee.
And this is an interesting challenge for us to look into too, because we haven't really dealt with offline storage. You know, where it's not just, we fought the dams on the river we didn't think they were needed, but
And
but
also,
this is another sort of method of getting water storage without, and you know, there's water storage is maybe needed, I don't know, for these communities, but they gotta look at all the impacts, they can't just.
So a lot of us, we bought riverfront property. riverfront property.
Right.
I didn't want creekfront property.
Yep,
Right. That's devaluing the value of my land,
yep.
Yeah.
and that's devaluing a lot of people's land.
Well, y'all are the best spokespeople. I mean, we'll certainly do that research and be there to support y'all, but y'all are the best spokespeople because y'all are the ones that are impacted.
Well, you know, the Tallapoosa River's on the Department of Tourism, scenic river trails. And this should speak, that department in itself in our state should be very vocal on this too.
You got a national park down below it too.
You do, you definitely do.
Well, do you think the Big Tallapoosa has a canoe trail on it already?
Yeah.
It was the Big Tallapoosa? Yeah. Why don't we go in and throw a trail on the Little Tallapoosa?
I like that, we'll work with you on that. Alabama Scenic River Trails will help get you connected.
There are some sites in Kensington.
But we definitely are on the scenic river trails route, and it feeds our big river, and this is monumental.
And that has been a priority for Governor Ivey. Her administration has
She's
done a
very
lot
much
with
for
tourism.
that, absolutely. It's a big push, it's where a lot of the grant monies are. Tourism.
I want to thank the Alabama Rivers Alliance for coming and making the trip here to speak to us tonight. In dealing with water, as we see, there are a lot of ins and outs and tough decisions. And we need to do, starting the water wars over again probably ain't gonna help us much. I was reading over that this afternoon. At one point, the Corps of Engineers was sued by Alabama, and then turned around, they were sued by Georgia as well, and which may have meant they were trying to do their job right. Both of them sued them. The only beneficiary in a long, drawn-out court case is the lawyers, is legal persons. They're the ones that benefit from this. We do have a ways to go in Alabama, and I hope some of you have gotten an idea tonight as to how far we have to go to get a water plan in this state and what we need to do. But the states around us have one. And when we go to court, we're at a disadvantage, the state of Alabama is, because we cannot provide them with accurate information. We can claim this or claim that, but we can't show it. We can't provide the information we need to. And Senator Price and I need to work on that, I think, try to get some improvements in those, along those lines. Yes.
As individual citizens, what can we do to push the legislature to at least consider this?
We're here, but we are your legislators. The two of us are. We represent all of Randolph County.
Right.
I do, and Senator Price does as well. And just stay in touch with us, work with us. If there are meetings, and there was talk of going and speaking with the folks over at Carroll County, it doesn't just need to be us, it needs to be some of you as well.
I will be there.
And we need to make it clear that we would like accurate information as to how much they're taking out, what they're putting back in, and the quality of the water that they're putting back in. And so it's a very difficult situation. But we have no more precious item as human beings, I think, than water. And that's one thing we can't do without. I mean, we've got to have control over our water. And I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. If you want to have any questions, ask them, because they're much more able to tell you answers than I am. But you're welcome to talk to one another or Craig.
Yes. So how hard would it be to reestablish this committee that you're on?
From what I heard, it was just dropped. That joint committee that I was serving on that dealt with water issues. And we didn't, if there's only an appointment or two to make, it wouldn't be that hard to start the committee up. Now, that's not going to give you a water plan immediately. You know, and we're kind of in a situation where, you know, your situation is calling for some fairly immediate action.
Correct.
A question to me is, who does the plans? I mean, is it, I know the state's responsible, but do they draw from their universities to do their research and write it, or who do they use?
And evidently it varied from state to state as to the process they used to come up with a water plan. And some of it used stakeholders or special interests like the power companies and those folks to come together and do it. And some use more universities, and I guess it just varies as to who you want to sit down and do that. And Governor Ivey would have to be involved in getting this done. A couple of legislators probably wouldn't be able to do it without some influence on up the line.
Another question.
Craig?
All right, do we know people that can do water quality testing? And while the pool is down at its lowest right now, let's go ahead and start testing it for coliforms and stuff like that.
Evidently, we have people that do water quality testing right now at
For the
Lake, on the lake.
LWPOA, we have 12 to 13 testers that test on a monthly basis.
But we need to send them up to the right spot.
Well, if you
Right
give
off
me
like-
where you want,
I know.
then we'll get somebody up there.
Coles Mill Bridge, that's gonna be your lowest point right there, or even my property myself.
Okay,
And
we can do that.
And we should go right below, right on the state line, we should find.
Would you like to be able to test yourself?
Yeah, I was gonna,
Say again?
Would you like to be
Anybody,
able to test
anybody
yourself?
can be a tester, just,
I mean, yes,
you can get in
as long as
contact
you
with
do the right place,
me.
the right places
We
to
will
send it to.
provide all the equipment, all the chemicals at no cost to you. We fill out information, it ends up going into the Auburn University, who sends it to the
Alabama Water Works.
Alabama Water Works. It's all online, you can see it, it's all over the lake.
And you can see what everybody else is doing on
And where they're
the website when you log in.
yeah.
But
this
we
is-
would love to have more testers, we really would.
And I'd love to encourage you, this Alabama Water Watch is a statewide program, and it's a citizens program, and this is what, and y'all are doing it through Water Watch,
Yes.
correct?
Exactly.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
by
and so-
doing this, that does give us a little bit of ammo, because we can say,
Yes.
even if they do get it turned on, well, now, you're taking more.
Right.
This is our numbers before, this is the numbers after you started doing this.
Right.
And then it gives us a fighting point, or at least a regulatory,
Mhm.
something to
Yeah.
come back on and say, look,
Absolutely,
this is
and
what you've
it's
done.
just important, even if we didn't have this issue, it's important to keep the water tested at every point in the lake. So, absolutely, you know, I'll give you my contact information, I'll get you in touch with the man that's in charge of all this and is certified. We would love to have anybody that would like to do it at no cost to you. Takes a couple hours a month. Tom does it, and it's, I don't want to say it's easy, but just takes a couple hours of your month, so a couple hours.
And then-
Any other questions or comments for you? Yeah.
What do you need from us as a county or groups of people to try to get Governor Ivey to reinstate that committee? Will she have to be the one that?
Let's just see, if we contact her, we may be able to get that committee reinstated. But it will take a lot more. She will have to make a lot larger effort to get a water plan put together.
Yes, but to get
But as far as actually getting that committee reinstated, you know, Senator Price and I may do that. I will be glad to talk to the Speaker of the House, Speaker Ledbetter, and if it's just lacking a couple of,
I'll send you the letter that we sent last year to him, just so you
Okay.
can see what, was just kind of a summary of what had happened, and
okay.
I'll send that to you.
And if there's just a couple of appointments to make, that may not be that big a deal as far as getting the committee up and running again.
And that's what I was saying, do you reckon to get that back up, do we need signatures from people or organizations to get back behind it, or?
Probably I'd wait till the water plan comes along to do a lot of public contact and that sort of thing.
But we need the committee, I'm saying to get her to reinstate the committee.
Right.
Or the
right.
speaker or whoever.
It would also be helpful if with even those private meetings, if there was a committee, they knew we had a committee, when we go over and talk to Georgia, and y'all go talk to Georgia, and we go with y'all, and that might be something that when you're carrying a group like that, that can ask proper questions, bring water testing information as well, and whoever sets up the monitoring stations, they need to have some set up. I might be, no, Buckfall Bridge would be right above me. That's probably the first one from the state.
That's the first one from Georgia State.
And then my bridge that I
Yeah.
would be the second bridge.
Well, you might have a couple of sites there along the Little Tallapoosa to measure. And I remember the guy I was with had 3 or 4, seemed like he did. The one, Bill Boozer, when he was doing them, he had 3 or 4 sites that he tested. All right, thank you everyone for being here, and we'll see what we can get done. Thank you once again to Alabama Rivers Alliance, and we will stay in touch and see what kind of progress we can make. All right,
And
thank you.
I'd like to encourage people to sign up and get on our email list, so when we do have other meetings, that you'll be notified of this.
Okay, and that's back on the table back there, right?